Greetings fellow travellers and traders. Pull up a stump and warm your cockles by the fire. You won't be needing that there weapon. At least not in the game. This evening we're going to be looking at trading mechanics in games. No need for violent dispositions here, unless the trading goes sour, of course. Now, what do I mean by trading games? There are lots of games with trades in them that don't qualify for this here video, like Go Fish. I haven't played Go Fish. Is that how that works? For this here video, I'm going to define trading as any system that allows players to exchange goods with one another or a centralized market for the purpose of gaining points or wealth. This doesn't include games where resources are purchased or acquired solely to be converted into other items or units or buildings. How does it work? I give something, I get something. It's a simple transaction. Or is it? Not always. Trading definitely can be simple, but as soon as you throw in the idea that different resources are worth different amounts to different players around the table, you get into a whole new world of strategy and politicking. As a good example, let's look at one of the earlier board games to feature trading as a core mechanic, Civilization. Not that Civilization, but certainly one that had a heavy influence on that civilization. Civilization, released in 1980, seats players around the Mediterranean Sea, each in charge of their own rapidly growing population. As your population grows, you can create cities, which allows you access to more and more resources. Resources in the form of trade cards. Foreshadowing. Having more of a particular commodity gives exponentially higher points. For example, having 1 salt gives you 3 points, but holding out and getting 3 salt will get you 27 points. So a trade for salt is worth so much more to a player with 2 salt already than a player with none. As an aside, the game also features a lovely rule where you only have to tell the truth about 1 card in a trade, allowing you to slip other players cards you know they don't need, or calamities like famine. Delightful. Trading mechanics generally crop up in games about strategy or simulation, allowing another way for you to push up against the systems of the game. Another thread in a web laid from the underside of the designer with the sole purpose of trapping your imagination and consuming you until the game is sated and there's nothing left of the person you once were. That's games, baby! What's the history of trading mechanics in games? It's tough to say exactly when trading first started being added into games, but it was definitely popularized through wargaming in the late 1900s. Coming in so recently in gaming history, trading was added into video games around the same time as it was becoming popular in board games, so the two very much fed off of one another. The first instance of a game centering around trading was in 1973 in the game Fur Traders, where you played as French explorers traveling through North America in 1776. Your only goal is to buy and sell different kinds of fur from 3 different outposts in order to make enough money to just keep on keeping on until eventually you're probably killed by the locals. Colonization, definitely not worth it. Trading is really satisfying. The core rules are generally quite simple to teach and play, but the systems and gameplay that grow from those teeny tiny little rules can become super enjoyable to dig into. Whether you're playing solo in a game like No Man's Sky, just jumping from planet to planet trying to find places to buy and sell your wares until eventually you discover the 2 sacred triangles and exploit the ever-loving shit out of them until you become richer than the gods themselves. Or exploiting the crap out of poor artists and your fellow players' art galleries in the phenomenal auction board game Modern Art. A game where you and a few gullible fools play as art galleries trying to make the most money from selling overworked artists' creations. The artists that sell well each round become more and more bankable, but the artists that don't sell anything at all become worth nothing. It's a tense game of bluffing, double bluffing, and trying to out-auction your friends to become the richest player at the table, all stemming from a deceitfully simple set of rules. Whether used as the sole mechanic of a game, or as is often used as a side mechanic to the main event, trading adds complexity and a system that is inherently fun and also more importantly useful to explore. Take one of my personal favourite video games of all time, Mount & Blade Warband. The game is mostly about going out into a bandit-filled land, recruiting peasants, giving them swords, and then making them kill anyone for profit or glory. And yet the game has a fairly in-depth trading economy, with prices of individual resources rising and falling based on scarcity and location availability. A town that's connected to a village that grows iron probably won't want your iron, but might be a great place to buy iron to sell somewhere else. A lot of wealth can be accrued by making savvy purchases and then selling your goods and your loot for profit. Wealth that you can use to hire more peasants and buy bigger swords. forts, or even castles. Why siege a city when you can buy it? The trading and economy wasn't central or important to a game about conquering and warfare, but adding them in changed it from this war game into a game about medieval simulation, living in this medieval world. Although relatively simple in core concept, executing trading well can be quite difficult, and it can often be hard to know how much information to give the players about the system they're trading within. Too much information and it becomes trivial to make an easy profit, but not enough and the game can feel unfair and harsh, just like the economy in the real world. Some games also just don't need the complexity that comes from adding in trading and economy. It's a lot of work for the developers and designers, and sometimes it's just not important. For example, Batman Arkham Asylum doesn't need trading. At no point will that make you feel more like Batman, and so they didn't include it, and that was a great decision. Trading mechanics can also become a crutch if implemented poorly. Take Monopoly, for example, a game where I'm just going to talk now and move my mouth around a lot, and then I'll just bleep and blur all of it. In Monopoly, you buy and trade properties as you make your way around a board. A setup that could be interesting, but lacks any real depth or intrigue, and doesn't justify a game in which literally nothing else happens. Throw Monopoly out and get Root instead. Doesn't really have trading in it unless you're specific factions, but it's much better than Monopoly. Beyond games I've already mentioned, trading shows up in all kinds of games, from solo RPGs like Pokemon all the way through to MMOs like World of Warcraft. It's everywhere. Go out and spot games with trading mechanics in the wild, but don't touch, they bite. It shows up in board games from Bonanza to Twilight Imperium to little card games like Jaipur, a game where two players take it in turns to trade with a central market in an attempt to accrue more of an individual resource to sell in bulk for a tasty payday bonus. Now Matt's going to talk about his favourite trading game.
Despite its flaws, my favourite trading game might just be its perfect expression of competitive trading. But to be fair, it's not that fun, and to maintain my credibility, I should probably talk about something else. Another of my favourites is Compounded. Now, I don't actually have a copy of Compounded, but thanks Josh. So, Compounded is a game where you're trying to build chemical compounds, hence the name. You do this by drawing elements at random. You can get sulfur, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, that kind of thing, calcium as well, which you then build into compounds. They're laid out in a grid in front of you. And you can trade with your opponents for these elements, build these compounds. And the reason it's interesting is because everything's laid out in the grid in front of everyone and you have limited space on your lab bench, you have to start playing your elements typically before you've got everything you need to complete a compound. So you can see what your opponents are trying to do. You can see very visibly their goals and they can see your goals, which means when you're trading, you know what your opponent's going for, they know what you're going for. So everything's on the table, quite literally, and that means it really comes down to, do you think this trade is going to be worth more to you, or is it going to be worth more to them? It means you'll trade with someone who's behind everyone quite happily, because you don't mind if they catch up a bit, you're already ahead, which helps players who aren't doing as well in a particular game, which is a nice consequence of the mechanic. And everything in this adds up to it being just a fascinating game with some very simple basic rules. I recommend you try it out.
Thanks Matt, and over to Toby.
Trading mechanics takes me back to when I was but a young whippersnapper, and to everyone's favourite class-based shooter, Team Fortress 2. Trading may not be the main draw of this particular game, but it was one of the first major video games to introduce player-to-player trading of weapons and cosmetics. As a quick introduction to the TF2 economy, roughly every 50 minutes of gameplay you get given a free item. Most often this will be a random weapon, but if you're very lucky it could be a hat or another cosmetic. 2 weapons can be converted into 1 scrap metal, 3 scrap can be converted into 1 reclaimed, and 3 reclaimed equals 1 refined. Hats are usually worth anywhere from 1 to 4 refined metal. There are of course more valuable items, but as a youngling, my focus in this economy was on the penny stocks. People, me included, would sit on non-official trading servers, mess around and spam their wares into the in-game chat. My particular scheme involved one more puzzle piece, trade bots on external websites that were set up for easy trading between weapons and metal. You could also offer 1 weapon for any other weapon. This is where I and a few other sneaky players saw opportunity. I would buy up the in-demand weapons from these bots, those that were deemed best in the most recent patch, or some of the more fun and silly weapons like the rocket jumper or the sticky jumper that allowed even more non-combat based gameplay in this first-person shooter. For little me, this was a fun way to satiate that urge to get rich quick, netting me up to 10 pence per day. This game was my first experience of free market economics, and it taught me valuable things about trading and liquidity, and I think that's a very useful skill to know.
Trading.
Trading.
Most trading games, especially trading games where you trade directly with other players, are very adversarial. You trade for something that lets you succeed, but in doing so will give your opponent something that lets them succeed. And that's where the interesting dynamic comes. In any resource accumulation game where you're trying to get resources that let you do something, let you win, trading is a very obvious mechanic that can come up. To the point that games where you have resource accumulation, like train cards and Ticket to Ride, or the countless gubbins from Scythe, them not having trading, that's a conscious choice. Scythe, in its rules, explicitly forbids it. Ticket to Ride forbids it by omission. And that raises the question, what would trading take away from these games? And I think it's scarcity. In Ticket to Ride, part of the interest is trying to plot routes with scarce resources. You can't just take the most direct way because you don't have the cards for it. And if you could trade, it eliminates that really interesting mechanic. And Ticket to Ride still has plenty of interaction with other players in the blocking each other off and the whole race. And that's where its tension comes from, that's where its interest comes from. You don't want to undermine that by introducing trading where it isn't needed. The same goes for Scythe. It's already complicated. They want to focus you on the places where they've designed the interaction to be fun and interesting, like the mech combat or the race to the factory. But this raises a question. If scarcity is what trading minimizes, is there a circumstance in which trading does the opposite? And it's where we come a full circle. Monopoly back! Monopoly was actually designed as a game to simulate monopolies, to show why a system where people getting loads of stuff actually allows them to keep it and prevents other people from getting it in the same way. In any situation where the resources are limited, where there is scarcity, there is a setup where that scarcity is exaggerated. That's what Monopoly's rules were designed to do, and it's why it's not very fun. But it is interesting.
I recently came up with a good twist on the card game Rummy, where you put half your cards in front of you as your wares and keep the rest hidden. You then trade with the player who just went before you, trying to work out what they want and what you want. It's a step up from regular Rummy because there's more decisions to be made and there's more free information out there that other players can take advantage of, so you'd better be careful. There's still a few wrinkles to iron out, but once it's ready it'll be in a PDF on the bonus levels section of our website. Check it out in the description. Apples for 2 pence on the dollar.
Buying gold, selling
apples, selling bananas,
buying
selling all
wood.
kinds
I
of
want
fruit.
20
Vegetables as well.
wood.
Come
I
on,
want
come and get your money.
13
Come and get your fruit.
Give me some
Come
sheep.
and get them now.
I want sheep.
I'm selling
gold.
What's that?
Yeah. Thanks for watching this video of Merchanting for More, working title. If you like this video, give us a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of this kind of content. Next time we'll be looking at turn-based mechanics in games, so stick around for that one. I think that's fine.